All right, welcome back. This is a Something Ventured podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Joe Garofoli. How are you doing?
All right.
So Joe is the senior political writer with the San Francisco Chronicle, which is the newspaper of record for San Francisco.
Just San Francisco? I thought we were the voice of the West, my friend.
The voice of the West.
That's what it says in the map.
And the Bay Area. And now he's the host of the It's All Political podcast, which is a fabulous podcast, which is the podcast of the San Francisco Chronicle.
Yeah, it's one of the political podcast. Yes.
And he has guests on like Chuck Todd. Full disclosure, we went to college together.
Yes.
I don't want to end up in podcast court. We went to school.
Is there a podcast?
I don't know.
I would be frightened.
You listen to Silicon Valley podcasts, and some of them people are like, they saw it on TV or something, and they're so heavy with the caveats. They're like,
right.
There's this guy who put his life saving into Bitcoin. Full disclosure, I'm not advocating. Like, really? Is podcast court going to...
Well, there's no money involved here, except maybe who will be buying beers after the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, last time we were on this microphone together was the night before the elections in 2016. Right. I remember who I was with, like the night that the September 11th happened. I remember who I was with the night before the 2016 election. And I haven't gone back and looked. I assume we nailed it. I assume we picked Donald Trump.
Yeah, I remember saying Trump is going to surpose a lot of people.
Surprise a lot of people.
Yeah.
And of course, the big issue was at Prop E that you don't have to take care of your own sidewalk.
I forgot that.
That was my.
That was your issue.
I'm like, what the real nightmare scenario is in this election? if I got to keep paying for a damn sidewalk in San Francisco.
Well, I'm glad everything turned out all right in that election.
I actually do have by the way, we went to college with Stephen Colbert.
Yes, we did.
Do you remember that guy?
Not at all. No.
I think
he was a year or two older than I was.
But he was
a couple years older than you.
He was in my dorm.
Was he really?
Yeah, like in Willard, it was just dorm in Northwestern, and like I don't remember the guy to save my life. Really? Like I want to be like, oh yeah, that guy. I totally remember him. I don't remember him at all.
Wow. No, I don't. I was in that dorm too for the first year, and I don't remember him really.
And he's got like one of those crazy. It's one of those crazy stories where he couldn't get into the comedy thing. I think, or maybe that's David Schwimmer. I don't know. They couldn't get into.
Wait, did you produce that? Which one did you produce?
No, I produced the musical.
You produced the musical.
The
WAMU, right?
The Anne Margaret was in that one, going back. And for the kids, Meghan Markle went to Northwestern. So, on that election night when actually Donald Trump stunned everybody. I've been thinking about this for a year, or bringing this up with you. I thought the press did a great job. I'm not that guy who's like, oh my God, the press. They gave him too much coverage. Like, they'd be crazy not to. But the one thing that kind of stuck with me is that in the coverage leading up to the election, if you looked at like London betting markets, or you knew how to read a poll or anything like that, Donald Trump's chances of winning were like 20 or 25%, and that just seemed kind of obvious to me. And it seemed like the press, and I kind of mean CNN in particular, New York Times a little bit, seemed to cover it as if his odds were like 0%. And I feel like that, I could see that. And maybe I was just looking at the London betting markets and I was the only guy doing that. And 20% is not good odds. It's not like you're going to win. But it's not like you wouldn't get on that airplane with 20% chance of crashing either.
Right. And some of the polls did call him, the very latest polls had him within 3% or within the margin of error of winning, and everything went right for him in terms of that. But yeah, that was the mass media, myself included. I was dead wrong in public a million times, and I think we were leaning on the pollsters a lot because that's our data source. And we were dead wrong. And plus, it was not only leaning on it for the data source, it was the reporting that we did, and maybe we weren't in touch with his voters, and we didn't read the trends on the ground in Michigan and Wisconsin and stuff. I reported for some of those areas. I remember going, and maybe I told the story then, going door to door in Ohio and going to union households, and you'd think those were traditionally be Hillary Clinton Democratic voters, and in house after house, the people would say, and I was going with union canvassers,
Right.
And they would say, I'm voting for the Democrat. They wouldn't even say her name. I was like, wow,
okay.
that's not good.
That's troll. Yeah.
That's not good. But a lot of them didn't vote for the Democrat, and a lot of them because they feel that the system is not working.
Yeah.
And it's not working for them, and so I'll try something different. This guy's going to screw with the system. I feel like things aren't working for me, so why not try something different?
Yeah. I mean, the place where I saw this most was on CNN, and it would, or on, I guess, mainstream television, and it would happen the most when somebody would just say, like, if Donald Trump wins, like, this would happen. You speculate all day long, right? But the reaction he would get from the group would be like interrupted by gales of laughter kind of thing. And I wonder, I think I don't buy putting Donald Trump on TV so much made him get elected. I wonder, though, if that confidence that he had zero chance enabled a couple of Bernie bros to stay home when they, if they really thought it was a real odds, they might have been heading out to the polls.
Maybe, but I think that also, I mean, I think that the free media he got early in the campaign, which was it, I forget the figure now, was it $1 billion or something like that?
Yeah.
Free, like when you say, free media, obviously television coverage, they were covering his rallies wall to wall, which was highly unusual to do.
Yep.
Because they were compelling television, and that's the reason they put it. The cable news puts anything on, and I think that's what he benefited from, and that helped to legitimize him as a candidate. They could goof on him afterwards, but his message got out there for free, and widely disseminated, and I think that gave him a sort of a running start that he wouldn't have ordinarily had, and other candidates didn't have. You didn't see anybody putting Ted Cruz's speeches live because they were boring.
And wasn't he picking up the phone every day? I mean, not now, but back then, like, he'd be on the CNN. Hey, I'll give you 10 hot minutes of whatever.
He'd get on the phone. He'd call Morning Joe, which is widely watched in Washington. He would call in, and that is content.
Yeah.
Content is king.
Yeah.
Trump provided content himself and very cheaply. It was, as you say, him picking up the phone.
Yeah.
Again, that helped him immensely in the early days. And then, he was no longer a joke once he started winning these primaries.
Right. Well, and that is funny, too. I have friends who, they must have gone like 90 times deep on like, well, this time he's done it. Oh. And by about the 9th primary, where you'd heard the day before Shields and Brooks explain why he couldn't possibly win, and he won. And to their credit, they got a little better, Shields and Brooks. But they'd kind of say, look, we've been predicting his failure 9 times out of 9, and we got to stop that.
I can't tell you how many times I've written the story. Well, this has got to be it. We all did.
Yeah.
And then in my said, well, this is going to be it. And then it got to the point where I'm like, well, no. And now we're obviously to the point where his sort of offhand comment of my people will be with me if I shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue is pretty much true, I think, and now it's the point, the ultimate test is going to be if we ever get to the point of impeachment. We obviously have to wait till see what the Mueller report is, or what it says, or if there's anything in there worth it bringing up impeachment charges. But you'll still have that 30 to 35% of people saying, "Yeah, I'm with you. Right. You haven't shot anybody yet."
Yeah, and that would be another good 10 minutes of TV. The NRA would love it. Why is this so effective? Like, why? Here in San Francisco, California, in Silicon Valley, if people were elected or lost elections on Facebook outrage, Donald Trump would not be president, judging from my timeline. No. But that's not how it worked. And it just seems like it gets more and more ludicrous, and my liberal friends get more and more outraged. And it doesn't seem like it has an impact either on his voters or on the Republicans around him. Like, they somehow just seem to skate through something that you would think would be unimaginable to skate through. But nevertheless,
the Republicans have not pushed back on him for the sole reason that they have a Republican as president.
Right.
Someone, a friend who was visiting from out of town last night from Virginia, he said, well, what about Paul Ryan? How could he do this? How could he, well, Paul Ryan is focused on, who is a friend of the Valley. He's often out in Silicon Valley. I've interviewed him in Silicon Valley, and his main issue was taxes. And he got that issue. He was willing to let all the other stuff slide. It got to the point where before the election, he said, I'm not going to answer any more questions about Trump.
Right.
And I'll be with him when he's, he has stood by him.
Yep.
He's blown off just about everything. And he got his tax cut.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, a lot of people in the Valley who are, the Silicon Valley leadership group.
Yep.
Carl Guardino, very, friend. I've known him for years. But they are for, they love the tax cuts themselves. Yeah. Now, other issues, they're not. On immigration, they're not with them. But they were all about the tax cuts, and they got those.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely a bunch of people in Silicon Valley who, I think Donald Trump was a bridge too far for many of them, but not all of them. And for that reason, they want the tax cuts. And they want the carried interest thing that people should probably be bummed about, but it's so hard to explain to anybody.
Right. And he initially said, this is BS.
Yep.
That we shouldn't. This is something that we should close, and then he didn't.
Yeah.
And I think the Valley kind of looked down on him because of he's a real estate guy. He isn't an entrepreneur. He's an entrepreneur, but not the Valley's kind of entrepreneur. He hasn't created anything. He built buildings, but he's mostly into marketing now.
Right. And
there was a little bit, of, well, what did he do? He didn't create something. He didn't create it wasn't the type of innovation that is endemic to the Valley.
Yeah. Of course, same with Barack Obama, and boy, does Silicon Valley love Barack Obama.
Yes. So that's for
oh man.
Yes. Not for the taxes.
Is there any part of this that's like redeeming? Any part that's like once in a while when he does something with Israel or North Korea, and I get really outraged, and then I realize I'm like, well, I don't have a better idea, and B, it wasn't like any other president was just figuring it out with those guys. Does this work for anything, or is it just the kind of shit show that it seems to be?
Well, here I'll answer it this way. A couple months ago, I was walking out of church.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. There you go. For all the heathens out there, it's like, wow, this guy went to church. Yeah, once in a while. I'm a buffet Catholic.
I hope you prayed for the rest of us.
I did.
I appreciate that.
I mentioned your name. And so the priest, who I've met a couple times, and I just go in there, do my business, and get out.
Yeah.
And he pulls me aside and goes, are we going to be all right with this guy? And I was like, wait, did I miss something? What guy, God? Or who's he talking about?
Right.
And he goes, this guy, he's doing a lot of weird stuff. And I go, oh, the president. And then I was like, first of all, like, wait, you're asking me? I think you believe in a higher faith than I do. And
but you got a political podcast.
Yeah, right? It's all political. And I said, the institutions of the country are holding. The courts are pushing back in many cases. The civil society is pushing back. You saw just in the last few days with the outrage about what's going on at the border with the detention camps for the families being separated. That was people pushing back on him through online and the media and protests and such. So that's a good sign.
Right.
Like, whatever you think about Trump, that's a good sign that those institutions are still firm and strong and vibrant.
Right.
Regardless of your politics, they would do the same on the if people were outraged on the left of something.
Right.
There has been that they'd be pushing back, and so I think that's the silver lining for you.
Yeah. Well, I think on that issue, I think he kind of realized like, crying kids is not great.
Oh. When he responds to what's in the media. It's bad. It's bad TV.
He knows that's bad television. Like, setting people back across the border looks good. Like, kids in cages.
Kids in cages, never good.
Not on brand for me.
Not really not on the human brand. Yeah.
Oh man. So what, like looking forward, I feel like people are still kind of sanguine about it, that they're sort of like, I still have friends who are like, the Democratic Party's corrupt. And like I could easily see Donald Trump just winning again on the same Bernie bros, like, they're equally, it drives me nuts, but.
Right. To win, to replace him, you have to have, the simple political formula. You have to be unhappy with who he is.
Right.
But then who is the replacement?
Right.
And what's the message? The
Right.
Democrats still don't have a coherent message other than Trump sucks.
Well, and clearly that doesn't work. Like
Trump sucks doesn't work.
I don't know why, but like he said this before, and now he said something different. I've heard 9,000 times, and it's true.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to have an impact on anybody. And I'm always fascinated when CNN goes and interviews people, even on this border thing. They interviewed Trump supporters, and the worst he got was like, both sides need to kind of come together on this. It wasn't like, oh, he's being ridiculous. It's like both sides, need to kind of, you're like, okay, I give up.
It doesn't. You're not growing the pie there. Can you growing the? Is that wrong? Is that right?
Yeah,
growing
right,
the pie
exactly.
or whatever. You're not growing your market share by talking about that, because it doesn't win anybody new over.
Right. Well, and I mean, it seems like the Democrats' game isn't going to be convert Trump voters. It's get the Bernie guys to not vote off book. Like if
I think that's going to be less of an issue this time. I think that the party is the Democratic Party is coming together a little bit better on that. I think they see that, and I see they've won some some smaller victories, and,
right.
and they're seeing that they need to come together. And Bernie is strongly influenced who the next nominee will be. All these folks who are being talked about right now, whether it's Kamala Harris or Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand.
Is there one more?
Why am I spacing from Massachusetts? Elizabeth Warren are all kind of left of center folks.
Right.
There's some that are more moderate, and forget Joe Biden.
But I'm just gonna say, what about Joe Biden?
No.
Too late.
Too late.
Oh,
Too late. It's like this is his third time up, or third or fourth time
that's
up.
True.
Come on.
That's true. But you think people just want the most normal damn thing that we could possibly have, which seems to be like.
Well, he's certainly not going to grow the pie. He's like
Yeah.
he's certainly not going to get anybody excited about it.
Yeah.
Eric Garcetti, the mayor of LA, too.
Yeah.
I should throw in there.
Well, so turning to our fair city, San Francisco and California, we just had elections here.
We did.
We had very odd elections in San Francisco. The tech community got. I literally didn't understand it, which seems to me to be a problem.
What the ranked choice voting?
Yes, ranked choice voting. So first of all, we had London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco, passed away. Ed Lee. London Breed was on the board of supervisors, and then she became the mayor because she was the president of the board. Mm-hmm. And then some kind of shenanigans ensued in which she was no longer the mayor, which I didn't really. And from there on, I was like, all right, I'm not totally following this.
And then she became the mayor again.
Yes.
She's the mayor again, yes. And she was, and for San Francisco, she was kind of pushed out of office in favor. London Breed is an African-American woman who grew up in the projects here, the housing projects here in San Francisco, and was pushed out in favor of a white guy, and with all due respect, venture capitalist.
Yeah, right.
Right. And in San Francisco, that just is, whoa, what are you doing? You might as well.
That's like central casting for like the bad guy, right?
Yes, absolutely. And but then she, they had an election for mayor, and she won. After 8 days of counting votes.
Yeah.
And we are the tech capital, correct?
Yeah.
Why does it take 8 fucking days
I
to count
don't know.
votes?
I didn't get that. It was kind of good drama.
Yeah.
They kind of released it every day at 4.
At 4, yeah.
But the thing that overall struck me was that something was going on with her getting kicked off the board. I didn't really get it, but whatever. Then she ran, and then the other 2 candidates sort of teamed up against her and said, cast your other vote for the other person.
Yeah.
Which just felt like 2 people ganging up on the African-American woman.
Right.
And so I don't really know what it all means, but if she hadn't won, it would have felt like there were some shenanigans and the African-American woman lost, the white guy.
You're gaming the system there. And then but that has become a proven strategy now with ranked choice voting. That's how I live in Oakland, and that's how we wound up with Mayor Jean Kwan, because she and another person who was Rebecca Kaplan said, make us your second choice.
Right.
And they kind of teamed up that way. against this guy, Don Parada, who was a state senator who they didn't like. And so Gene Kwan, who got fewer votes, wound up but more second place votes, wound up being the mayor. So this is now like a strategy. The reason we have ranked choice voting, for those still listening, is that it's to avoid costly runoffs that have low interest.
Yeah.
But I don't know. As a voter, I kind of want a one-on-one.
Yeah.
I learned the second time I did ranked choice voting to only put down one. I don't want my second choice vote. No, I don't have a second choice. I mean, I may have a second choice, but why would I want to vote for them?
Yeah.
that's because that's why they're second choice.
Well, yeah, like in the national election, my second choice, I guess, would have been Donald Trump because he was the only other guy. So I don't want that. Right.
You could have written somebody in, maybe.
Like, exactly. So what do you make of the San Francisco elections? The state elections, Gavin, we had another, that's a weird one too. Where
your neighbor here in the office.
Our neighbor in the office.
Does he still come in, or what's his deal?
Yeah, so we're here at the Founders Den in San Francisco. And Gavin, he's a lieutenant governor.
Yes.
And the joke, and even he'll make it, of course, is, what the job is. You wake up every day. If the actual, governor is still alive, you go do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. And he has certainly done that.
Yeah. The people criticize him for it, but I don't think Jerry Brown wants him around either.
No, not really. Gavin, I'll give him this. One thing that he did do was that he used the platform of the lieutenant governor's office to run a couple of ballot measures that got his name out there. One was to legalize cannabis here for recreational purposes in California. Right. And the other one was a measure that was sort of a gun control measure. And he showed that his chops, that he could go up against the NRA. And so he made the most of that. And that also bumped up his name recognition statewide. He got to go, get in front of these two statewide measures and campaign on those when he wasn't even on the ballot. Right. And it's kind of a warm up to this, and raise money and tap into new donors, blah 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 blah. So now that is not supposed to be much of a race. He's going up against John Cox, this guy who is a businessman who's only lived in California since 2011. Yep. He's run for various offices 5 times,
right, including
against Obama as senator. Yes, in 2004 in Illinois. He was in Illinois, and he's personally wealthy. As a business worth about $200 million. But in the terms that your audience might appreciate, the return on investment for donors to give to Republican candidate in California, not high.
No,
not a lot of R in that ROI.
So Gavin is a pretty good bet here.
Pretty good bet. Yeah. That and the fact that only 1 out of every 4 voters in California is a registered Republican.
Right.
So you don't have, and people generally vote with their registration. Yeah. Party registration is, and in fact there are now more people who decline to state a party preference than Republicans.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And most young people, people under, people younger than us.
Yeah.
People under 30 vote. They don't pick a party preference because they think both parties suck and they don't do anything.
Yeah. The Republicans are doomed, I've heard. I had a friend tell me that recently. This is the last gasp for Republicans. Like, last gasp? Like, don't they control most state houses, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency?
Yes. Outside, east of the Sierra. Yes, it is.
Other than that.
Going swimmingly.
Other than that. Will Gavin have some bold move when he comes into office?
Well, yes, he is. Because
he jumped the gun. He jumped the gun on the gay marriage.
Yes, I think he may.
That was. You forget now, but I believe it was the Clintons or whoever was running for national office at the time he legalized gay marriage in San Francisco, asked him not to do it. They not want to be attached to that issue, and he said, "I'm doing it."
Right. No. It was not the Clintons. It was John Kerry who was running for office.
Right.
The Bush folks used this as they put in ballot measures that were sort of anti-same-sex marriage in 11 states, and that was their sort of get out the vote to juice their turnout. And he was scorned at the time. Dianne Feinstein, our still senior senator, here in California, said it's too early for that.
Yep.
She has since come around on the issue.
Yeah.
But Newsom was way out front on that. And it's paying dividends now. People, his first campaign commercial running for governor was about that.
Yeah.
Was alluded to that move. He told my colleague Heather Knight, who's a columnist at the Chronicle, that he may be planning something having to do with immigration and when he becomes governor.
Yeah.
So it would be similar to making some sort of bold move that would be against federal policy. We already have sort of a sanctuary state law here that offers some protections for people who aren't citizens. But it would be something else.
Yeah.
And so we haven't quite been able to tease out what exactly that could be.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised because and one thing to say about Newsom, he is unafraid to try new things.
Yep.
Sometimes he swings and misses. I mean, but then you have something about he wanted to harness wave energy and from the bay or something. I don't know what that was.
Right.
But he tries new things and he knows the policy up and down.
Right.
And he's out there on stuff. So one thing he hasn't ever done though is work with Republicans.
Right.
Because number one, there are none in San Francisco, and then as lieutenant governor, you really don't see many other human beings at all.
Right. Yeah.
So he's really, this is going to be interesting for him.
What about California? And what happens, by the way, if he makes it a sanctuary state? Does it get to like us fighting the government and like what military
more
assets
lawsuits? We
have?
already are a sanctuary state. Yeah, I don't know what this would be, but it's not going to be our militia against anyone.
All this border stuff doesn't happen in California, right? Like when they're at the border or taking pictures in front of half-built wall.
We already have a wall.
Right.
we already have. You grew up near the wall.
I know. In San Diego, you got to wait 2 hours to cross when there's men with guns.
No, that's we were as we were first on everything. We were first in the wall too.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's good. It depends what it would be, how that reaction would be, because there's, already, Jerry Brown a couple months ago was the president asked him to put some state National Guard troops at the border, and now because of what's going on there now, some people are asking him to pull them back. So we'll see what he does. I don't think he will.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, there's only a couple hundred in there.
Yeah. What about universal health care for everyone in California?
Well, Newsom's in a bit of a pickle on that one.
Uh-oh.
When he was running, he secured the support of some very powerful unions, the California Nurses Union, SEIU and such, and he talked about how we are going to make universal health care a reality in California. Right. And then, so I asked him when he spoke to our editorial board, so when's that going to happen? What's realistically a timeline? He goes, well, kind of tamp down the expectations a little bit. It's not something that can be done.
Yeah, don't quit your job yet.
Yeah, with the stroke of a pen.
Yeah.
And I think he said, I think that's why some people are, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves on this. There's also going to be lawsuits, and let's face it, you have to transition all these people. Most people, 80% of people get their health care from their work.
Right.
And so what happens, Kaiser and Sutter aren't going to go away overnight.
Right.
How do you transition people if this were to become a reality from those places? And what happens to them? They don't go away. I mean, There's so many unanswered questions. This is going to be, it's a very, very complex question. And he was the most out there on this.
Right.
He and Delane Easton, who was also running for governor, were full-throated supporters of this. But it's don't expect to see that in 2019.
All right, so we'll look for the sanctuary kinds of
more. It'll be some
stuff.
Sort of immigration.
Which,
thing.
by the way, for California, agriculture is a huge issue. Like it's always been the case. I mean, as I understand it from living in San Diego, yes, there is a border and there's a fence, and they could protect it more. But the governor does not have an interest in making sure there's no farm labor in the state.
Right.
And even Ronald Reagan, by the way, was understood this, and George Bush, Texas, border state guys get this idea.
Right. And there's already, the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of, because of the tightening of the border and the restrictions on immigration, we have seen food left in the fields because it hasn't been picked up or fallen on the ground and because there hasn't been enough labor to work in the fields. And so that's the thing. It's like, some of the Trump's the core of his support in California was in the Central Valley.
Yep.
But some of the folks who are farmers are like, well, we need workers here. We don't we can't pay, or we don't want to pay native-born Americans to work in the fields. So they're in a tough spot.
Right.
And about labor, there is a labor shortage.
So here it seems like here in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, the place has just gone nuts somehow. In this election, sort of income disparity has become this huge issue in the city. I don't know if it's either become a bigger, homelessness was a single voter issue for a lot of people I talk to, and yet every time I hear Gavin or somebody talk, they always say some version of like, well, there's 7,000 homeless people. There were 7,000 homeless people 2 years ago. Like they don't, and there's 7,000 bad. They always say something. I'm like, well, okay, so there's still people sitting around the street. So what the heck's going on?
Right, and I think that it's the visibility of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been visible in San Francisco, and I think now it's visible in Oakland. I mean, there's people spilling out all over the place because I think a lot of the folks who are forced out of San Francisco moved to Oakland. I mean, people with money to buy places, and then that forced other people out on the street. 80% of the people on the street in Alameda County or in Oakland are Alameda County residents, and
right.
many of them residents for 10 years, and many and I've been out and written about this stuff, and it's the sad part. So many people are like, this is the neighborhood they lived in.
Is that true? I didn't realize that.
It's painful. And in San Francisco, there may be 7,000 people on the streets, but there's a churn of 7,000 people. I mean, it's not like
right.
the same 7,000 all the time. I think there's a core of that's what is it? 4,000 to 6,000. I don't have the numbers in front of me of people who are just the most hardcore homeless, and I think that's who they're trying to get off the street now. But it's the visibility. It's the tents is a new thing over the last few years, where it's not just people sleeping on the freeway. Now there's tents on the sidewalks, and so people were like, oh, it's annoying. The interesting thing is that this is no longer just a San Francisco issue. This is up and down the West Coast.
Yep.
There are 50,000 people in LA who are homeless.
Wow.
50,000, in a much bigger city, but still. Their mayor wants to run for president, Eric Garcetti, and the first campaign ad against him is going to be, panning 50,000 tents and say, dude, fix up your own city before you want to do this to America. Talking to Republican pollsters, they're telling me that for the first time, they're seeing homelessness come up as a top issue for Republican voters.
Wow.
Ordinarily, they wouldn't care. Now, they don't have a preferred option about what they want to do about it, but it's more like a quality of life issue. I don't want to see this, or it makes me feel bad, or whatever. But they don't say like, well, we need more supportive housing or more drug and alcohol treatment.
Right.
But it's an issue that has mushroomed beyond San Francisco, which was kind of ground zero for many years, to the not only all of California, into the suburbs, into the rural areas, and then up and down the West Coast. Seattle, you've been to Seattle lately. There's a huge homeless problem up there too. Yeah. It's so it's everywhere, and nobody really has any good ideas.
Right.
In San Francisco, obviously the cost of building housing is extraordinary, but you also have the public will, or the will of public policymakers to do something about it. You can do it, but it involves raising taxes, and involves, if getting the land, obtaining the land. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, and among the candidates,
and nobody wants in their backyard.
Right. Well, that's for sure. Nobody of the candidates, I couldn't tell you what any of their plans are. Like, no one has a simple sort of like, okay, we're going to build. I don't know. Like, they all kind of say something about affordable housing, and which I didn't realize the statistic you just brought up, that it's like 80% of people, because you see these people who are clearly have a mental health problem. Like, they're sick. They need help. They can't take care of themselves. That guy's not waiting for a $1,500 apartment in the Mission, and then it's okay. That guy needs medical help. Like, I don't know how to. I know it's expensive. I know it's hard to do, but that part's so clear.
Right. And and they have to, there also are laws about who can, for lack of a better word, force help upon
Right.
someone.
And that's getting changed somehow.
There's
Isn't it?
there's now for the first time there's talk about changing that law.
Yeah.
So that would help. It's a multi-pronged problem.
Yeah.
And in terms of building houses, housing statewide, Newsom and Villaraigosa, and Antonio Villaraigosa, the former LA mayor who was running for governor, he lost. They both talked about building an extraordinary number of here's how we solve the affordability problem. Right. We build don't space the number right now, X number of housing units per year in the state.
Yeah.
Well, that number of housing units has never even been. That'd be 5x times what's ever the record of what's been built in the state.
Right.
There are. You'd have to change the permitting processes, the environmental strictures on when and where you can build. There's just a lot to do before you can just say, well, let's lay the foundation right here, George.
And why do you think it feels like, being a tech person, and I live in the Mission and have for a long time, Mission District of San Francisco, which is recently historically Hispanic, it feels like there's a lot of blame of like tech guys who are, I mean, they just went to college and took a job in tech and moved to San Francisco.
Yeah.
But people are very mad at them.
Right.
Like, what do you make of that? Is it
it's real. It's the feelings are real in terms of all the people who don't, and we did the Chronicle, we did a big, major project a couple years ago called Changing Mission, where we just looked at one block of the mission as a way to illustrate the changing mission. And at one corner was a family who lived there many years. One corner was a woman who was on fixed income who come here from Central America. Other place was a former auto garage, now a guy who invented some app, and he's paying $5,000 a month for his unit, and someone's paying $300.
Yeah.
So it's all these forces are changing. When your life is changing, you're like, well, who's responsible for that?
Yeah.
Oh, I see these rich people come in who got tech jobs, and so that's who you blame. I mean, it's like human nature. It's just like, why do some of the white working class folks in the Midwest blame immigrants for losing their jobs? But they maybe they should have blamed the people who outsourced their jobs, or whatever. But so you want a convenient person to blame, and technically that's who is buying the homes where they lived or where their families live. So it's that's the people to blame. That's not going to go away. I mean, that's just human nature, and
it's funny. That is kind of, I mean, the one thing that does strike me sometimes, because sometimes you'll see these signs that are pretty virulent, they're pretty nasty, and you're like, you realize if it was anything but white dudes, that's an anti-immigrant message. That's like, new guys go home, basically. Like, you wouldn't do it if like a bunch of African Americans are moving into the hood and be like, there goes the neighborhood.
White people do that.
Oh, I know. That's what I mean. That's what
white people do it. Yeah. But I see what you're saying, and it's like, so you're saying a lot of the people who are moving in are immigrants. They're
new. They're new to the city, and I wonder if, going all the way back to Herb Cain, if he was like, oh man, 76 is really tough. 1975 was great, but the new hippies are,
Oh, I think that's an interesting. I wonder if what they thought. There was certainly a lot of backlash against the hippies and freaked out, and the gay folks.
Yeah.
When they were, the pushback on gay folks, it wasn't always, the Sunday is going to be Pride Day. It'd be a million people walking down Market Street in San Francisco. Certainly wasn't always like that. There was, the cops used to regularly beat gay folks.
Right.
It's things change and evolve, and I don't know what the answer is here, other than I don't know. I mean,
well, there's a thing where people, like, you pick your favorite year in San Francisco, and like, that's the best San Francisco. For some people, that was like the 60s. Some people thought it was great when it was like the 80s. People just have different times, like, that they think are great. With respect to the city of San Francisco, I remember when I first moved here, it was cool because I was like a business guy. I worked at Deloitte & Touche, which is a big accounting firm.
That's it. Yeah. You lived out by the beach, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is not a good, like, it's freezing at the beach here.
Yes.
It's not the same as like Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And So I just remember it being like a very cool, like art, like lots of artists.
Yeah.
And you were the square guy, but that was okay. Like they'd invite you into their cool thing and just kind of respect you being the square guy.
Yeah.
And that was kind of not like I do, that my nostalgia is for that, like the artistic, funky San Francisco.
But that San Francisco is fading now.
Yeah,
I
that's
it's like
that's,
honestly, it's come over to Oakland, Kento. Come on, it's like it's in Oakland now.
I know.
Seriously, I recognize that vibe, and I moved here a little bit after you, like early '90s.
Yeah.
And I recognize that era, kind of in Oakland now. We also have our own gentrification issues here in Oakland, but that's it's we're constantly moving and churning. I mean, so I think that's and then you have all the so these creative people and wealthy people moving back into cities, and like 10, 20 more than 10 years, 20 years before the .com boom. I mean, people were fleeing the cities. They're in the burbs.
Right, I was the lone kind of guy up here working in tech and driving down to Mountain View, and everyone else was like, "Oh, you should move down to Palo Alto. It's great. It's sunny. The weather doesn't suck."
I'm actually glad you didn't.
Yeah, I really am. I still enjoy this. When I moved to the Mission District, I used to live in North Beach, and so North Beach was very much about the artists and the Allen Ginsberg sat at this table kind of stuff. It was pretty cool. When I moved to the kind of Mission, then it was more the Hispanic thing is the awesome thing about the Mission, where you can go to the local bodegas and the 50-cent tacos are the best food you've had in a week. It's like that part, and that part is holding on. It seems like, but
there's some of it, yeah.
I mean, so far it's
through major efforts. I mean, like the 24th Street Project, Calle 24, but that required a lot of hoop jumping to kind of get those protections, and it's a lot of vigilance too by the neighbors.
And it's become very odd. So there's for example, there's a group that fights all that stuff, like anything coming in. But on Mission Street is pockmarked with payday loan places and empty storefronts.
It's
and all
that stretch of 16th and Mission for a couple blocks. It's never changes.
And so there's a Foreign Cinema is a restaurant that's been there forever, a nice restaurant, and they had an empty storefront next to them. They were going to put in a wine bar, which was just vigorously fought by this local organization because they're And you start thinking about it, well, it's kind of racist. Like, what, Mexicans don't drink wine? Like, that's ridiculous. And it's going to employ 30 people with health care. Foreign Cinema's been there forever. And so now there's an empty storefront, not a wine bar. Yeah.
Well, the one of the people who's in charge of that Calle 24th Street, which is a street runs right through the middle of the Mission District, and they're trying to preserve it at some level as a historic district. But they said we don't want it to be a museum.
Right.
But when a new storefront wants to come in and say we want to make crepes or something, said, okay, well, are you going to employ local folks?
Yeah.
Are you going to make the price points cool for the neighborhood? Because I think that's one of the, in addition to okay, you're replacing a local business, are you going to make the business that's moving in friendly to the people who live here? Give me a sandwich that I can buy here. And researching the project we worked on, that was a lot of the complaints about places was that. Like there's a bagel place there called Wise Son's Deli, and it's really a celebration of all kinds of Jewish food and culture and such.
Right.
And the guys there really, one speaks Spanish. They really try to be in the neighborhood. But one of the raps on them was, your cheapest bagel is like $12.
Right.
I don't forget, it was 9 or 10 or whatever it was. But it's like, come on, throw me a bone here. Help me out and make something that folks who live in the neighborhood or working class people can eat on a regular basis. So they work with them, and it's it's a hard, it's a challenging thing to do when you cannot. It's really hard to stop capitalism. The way our economy is structured, you have to make it. It requires significant changes to the way we do business. Literally. Yeah,
and when you dig in about who's moving in, it's people. It's just people want to be here for the same reason everyone else wants to be here, and they like bagels. There's nothing you can. There's nothing about them that if you really think about it, they're not really doing anything wrong. you just kind of wish it was still more than, they go out in groups of like 8 white guys.
Right.
And you
But the
just
more
kinda-
those guys move in, the less it's like the mission that you love, that
right.
you grew up
So
in.
I the part that I'm starting to miss is, grumpy old man is the,
He might be.
yeah, come on. It was like the melting pot part. You just
Yeah.
felt more like you'd walk in a bar and you start, some guy would be reading his Bukowski and you're like, hey, what do you just, 2 hours later, he's like, oh, come to my, thing, and we're doing it's $2 to see my stupid shit, whatever it is.
But
It
you
was
feel that is lost.
I don't.
That's
maybe I don't.
draining away.
Maybe I don't stay out late enough anymore. I don't know, but I do feel a little bit like. And how could an artist? There used to
No
be.
way.
You used to
Yeah.
go to the Mission for the $300 apartment, and then hey, if that didn't work,
No
at
way.
Bayview.
Yeah.
Or there are artist collectives like Artaud was this big art.
Oh, yeah,
Artaud.
Theater Artaud,
Artaud is a big collective, and off it goes. But I mean, is the answer you live in Oakland? Why does everyone have to live in San Francisco? I mean, like, why isn't Bart opening up I guess Orinda probably fights it, but why aren't people spreading out a little bit? Like, all right, Oakland seems lovely to me.
Well, you kind of hit on the head there. It was that a lot of the reasons that that you don't see more affordable housing in other places other than the big cities is that these suburban communities don't want it. They actively fight it.
Yeah.
There's there are laws that say you have to have a plan for some sort of affordable housing, and so people come up with a plan, but they never implement it,
Right.
and they don't accept it. They they fight at tooth and nail any attempt to build affordable housing or even more. More necessarily, for low income housing, but more affordable units, because they like it that way.
Right.
So so the pressures are all on the cities.
Yeah.
To absorb folks and they get all this tumult and in the suburban communities don't do their fair share.
Yeah. The thing I think I feel in San Francisco now is it used to be, and maybe this is still happening, I don't know, where now the Mission is the hot place. And so the provocative news article is always like, 1 bedroom in the Mission, look at this, it's $3,500. I'm like, oh, that is ridiculous.
Yes.
But what I wonder is if you go to a neighborhood like the Excelsior,
Yes.
is a 2-bedroom $2,800, which might be shareable and affordable? Like, is it?
The Excelsior until a couple of years ago was the hidden place. I used to. That was
Really?
they used the old Italian neighborhood.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I guess it was found.
Yeah.
The Mission's always the hottest thing, and they. I think we.
It wasn't when I moved there. When I
No,
moved
it
there,
wasn't.
it was people were like, oh,
Yeah. Sure, you want to do that?
Yeah, dangerous. Like was the
Oh, yeah.
was the word it wasn't. I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
And I actually moved to Noe Valley, not the Mission. And
Oh.
when I moved there, everyone had one thing in their little Noe Valley file, like, oh, that's what the lesbians are. I was like, yeah, there's that too. But
I don't know where to go from there. Lesbians in Noe Valley.
things change. Noe Valley, it used to be the working class place. My point is, when I moved there, everybody who was living where I was, Russian Hill, Pacific Heights, they were like, yuck. What the hell's that part of town?
Right, and that's the guy we wrote about in the Mission District project was the wealthy guy who could live anywhere he wanted to, and he goes, I came into town, real estate agent showed me Russian Hill, Pacific Heights, and I go, these places are boring.
Yeah.
I want to go to some place where it's a fun neighborhood,
Yeah.
and you move to a fun neighborhood. I mean, you don't. I want to live in Twin Peaks. It's like,
Right.
is there a burning desire? Anyone saying that?
Right.
It's like no. And I lived in the Richmond, and I love the Richmond
Yeah.
district when I lived in the city.
Yeah.
But and I think it's people have found it over the last few years. I mean, they now it's the pressures are there. I mean, the place where we used to live, my God, I couldn't afford that in 5 lifetimes, at this point.
It is pretty crazy. I have a friend who bought a place on what's called Liberty Hill, which is like between the Castro and Noe Valley above Dolores Park, and they bought it for like $600,000 in the 90s. And we were like, geez, that's insane. And then they sold it for like $1.1 million years later. And that was insane. And now it's like $4 million.
Right. And now, and so what you're getting is more, you get, the city becomes generic. The city that was just a very, an incredibly colorful tapestry is now just like, painted with a roller.
Yeah.
roller of of mauve. And so and that's San Francisco would lose its character, and all the reasons that you came here and then I came here.
And that's an interesting. So I have friends who are super liberal, but they want affordable housing, and so their solution is just wipe out the height requirements. Which a lot of the city, it's a very flat city. There's some high rises downtown, but it's not like Hong Kong where it's just high rises from
right
wall
or Vancouver for that matter.
Yeah,
right.
And so most of the neighborhoods are all 3-story buildings. And that's a limit, seems to be getting waived a lot. But their thing, which is not great for the character of the city, but for housing, is like wipe out the limits. Like up and down Mission Street, make it like Paris, 6 stories high rises out in the avenues. I mean, you can imagine the pushback they get for this.
God,
but
yeah.
Don't you ever hear that? Like,
that
version
that's
of things?
that's resurfaced now and again for years, and who knows if it's going to come to that? I mean, that may be because there is only a finite amount of land in the city. It's 7 by 7, so I don't know where that's maybe that's the next frontier. Certainly we've seen it. They waved the flag on that downtown.
Yeah.
In the financial district in south of Market, South Beach, and such. But I don't know if that would. I mean, there wasn't there. What was the Monster in the Mission a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
There was that, and then there was the and I don't know about the avenues. They usually doesn't get off the ground too much.
No.
There's a lot of strong pushback out there.
Yeah, it's funny that you just get the weirdest coalitions in the Mission. You get like super, super liberal people fighting affordable housing because it's on their block, but it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood is the argument, and that's
usually code for something else.
By the way, anybody who's a San Francisco supervisor, God bless them. I don't know how you sit through one of those meetings listening to rant after rant after. I couldn't do it. God bless them for doing that.
Yeah, no. Anyone who's in any kind of board, that's painful stuff.
So does this break any? I mean, is there just a point where I've had rabble rousers on the podcast talk about income disparity gets so bad that the peasants kind of revolt, but like on a more local level, like when you can't have teachers or servers living anywhere near here, will something just break at some point? I mean, that seems to be the real practical thing. Like I can't get a person to cook food at my restaurant.
You can, and that's already happening. I remember running stores a couple of years ago where you couldn't get people couldn't hire people to work, minimum wage or even more than minimum wage jobs in, like a small retail dress shop or something like that. That's the only thing that I think that at this point will do, or a crash. I mean, but I mean, people who are very wealthy will survive the crash, and I think the crash would just hurt the more low income people.
Right.
But that's the thing is, so if you can't afford to, if you can't find anybody, if you can't find anybody to work, because at this point, to work that job, you have to live, a 50 hour long BART ride away.
Right.
And then is it worth it? I mean,
Right.
you're paying, or if you drive, it's certainly not worth it in gas and parking to come in and work for $15 an hour.
Right.
So what does that leave you? It's like I can get a job that pays me maybe a little bit less, but closer to home, and I won't have to pay $30 a day to park if I'm driving, or pay X amount of dollars in tolls and such.
Yeah, I guess now that we talk about it, I guess what's happened is sort of the colonization of all the places that used to be the cheap neighborhoods, like the Mission and the Dog Patch, places you used to be like, well, I never go over there, but that's where everyone lives, and then we go out to dinner at Civic Center, and everyone kind of meets in the middle. I guess that's just all been colonized, and
there's also Bayview and Hunters Point. That's sort of the next frontier, I believe.
Yeah, well, if it hasn't, I don't know if it hasn't already cracked. So, all right, well, what else do we have to cover here? I think we've moved our way through San Francisco.
We moved through it.
Is there anything else on your
on my list? No, I just had some random stats here. That's okay.
Right.
Well, I'm here to serve. I serve at the pleasure of the president, as they say.
Hey, we
in the
appreciate it.
West Wing.
Look, Silicon Valley and the tech guys we're all entwined in this kind of crazy economic experiment here in San Francisco.
What do you think the responsibility is of like the big players to, to provide housing, to provide should they be doing like in the old days, the companies, there were company towns, the sugar company would, everybody lived near the mill and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But and maybe the company put up something for that.
Yeah.
Do they have a responsibility in like providing housing for the communities or providing something there?
Maybe, because they're using kind of it's not a public resource, really. I mean, it's not like they're putting tents on the parks, but they are kind of using up a resource. I mean, they're paying for it.
Right.
I mean, maybe as a practical, I think Google does that a little bit down in Mountain View. I think they've got housing that they own. One interesting thing that happens, although not in the housing, is Mark Benioff is a big benefactor in San Francisco. And his issue is that there's all these tech guys who get really rich. And it's important, but they're like off worrying about like global health and like, Davos kind of TED Talk kind of issues. And he's like, damn it, for example, as I understand it, Salesforce doesn't have a like food, like these companies will have a cafeteria and it's free food and it's, vegan, everything you could possibly want. His point is like, no, I want my employees walking out into the city of San Francisco and helping the local businesses.
Pandora did the same thing in Oakland to try and get people to go out, get out, integrate, and also Benioff is the gold standard in not only what he personally has given back to the community, but the company has, and at least they're supposed to. I forget what's the formula, the 1-1-1 or whatever.
Yeah.
And where you give 1% of your profits back, or your gross. I forget what the formula is, but but they do give back. He's done everything from build hospitals to put tech in the schools, and more important perhaps to have people going in and volunteering in schools and stuff. Now, the main reason he does that is he's a San Francisco boy.
Right,
he
of course,
grew up here. If someone if someone else parachuted into the town and made a lot of money, they might be less inclined to do that. They might be, I want to, work on water issues in Central Africa.
Yeah.
Great cause, but it's not.
Yeah, I think part of what
helping here.
Part of what happens too with entrepreneurs, these guys who get rich, is they kind of have this view of themselves as being super freaking smart and understanding how everything works. And so, rather than kind of like just giving money to policy people who can kind of work the issues and stuff, they have some new idea about how things should work, how they should measure the return on their investment,
which I think is I wrote a little bit when I was in the business section a few years ago. I did write about philanthropy a lot, and I was surprised that there is until the tech guys started giving a lot of money a few years ago. They do insist on metrics for what. But before that, it was just like, I want to give a big check. The old money folks. I want to give a big check to my favorite cause, but then say, well, what the hell do I get out of that?
Yeah,
which is a positive, and the other positive is they give money when they're younger.
Yep.
Increasingly so. They want to do it now as opposed to when I'm on my deathbed.
Yeah. And
feeling bad about everything. But I think that my experience has been when I talk to the tech guys about, well, why don't you give more money to housing or to kick into a housing trust fund or something like that, and like, well, that's not our expertise. We don't know that. We'd rather have let the experts try
it's all
that.
Science in the schools. Also a good cause.
But no one's going to be able to go to the schools. There's not going to be anybody left.
Yeah.
To go to the public schools if they're.
And that's always been a problem with like nonprofits. I worked at a theater nonprofit in the city, and the problem is all the grants are for productions. Like, it's a grant to bring the heritage of Mexico art to the city. The problem is there's no grant for, we need to keep this theater open, operating, heated, paid taxes, lit. There's no grant for that. And so it could be the equivalent where it's like, it's boring but important. It's like
right. And then and I think that's I think maybe in the last few years organizations or companies have woken up to that, but it's still they don't. If you're not from here, you don't know about Theodore Artaud or pick your favorite arts organization. And so that's where the Benioffs of the world have a bit of an advantage, is because they grew up here, they remember San Francisco, however they wanted to remember it, and they know what makes it great.
Yeah.
So,
all right,
make San Francisco great again.
All right. Well, I think we've done this thing. Thanks for doing
Can we go
this.
drink now?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Joe Garofoli of the It's All Political podcast. Check out that podcast if you have. Is that right? That's
It's
it?
on iTunes. Yes.
It's on-
You know how I got the name because they when I came back to Political Beat, I said like to have a column. I negotiated for the column as in addition to my duties, and they said it's named after my column print in the Chronicle, and they said, well, what are you going to call it? And I was like, call it what? Nobody knows what. Nobody
Right.
remembers the names of columns.
Right.
And I said, you got to have a name. I was like, all right, just call it Everything's Political. When I was very open about that, I was like, because if I want to write about something, and they said, well, that's not in your beat. And I go, hey, everything's political.
Yeah. Right.
So they did that, and then it came down to in the print version of the Chronicle,
Yeah.
the everything's political doesn't fit well
Oh,
in,
nice.
in an actual column space, and it's like, oh, that is so
Yeah.
19th century,
Right.
and I was like, fine, just call it like It's All Political.
Yep.
All right, that's good. And this was like 5 minutes before deadline. We
Wow.
came up with it. And I
Nice.
was like, fine, it works. And then now it's almost become kind of a gag.
Wow.
So it works.
This is how the Fourth Estate operates.
This is a little peek behind the curtain there.
All right. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. This has been fun.
Yeah, this is great. All right. This has been the Something About Your podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. Talk to you next time.